occupiers, local housing activists have documented the kind of conditions of sewage coming through the sinks, dampness and mould, infestation from pigeon waste, creating infections in children, no areas of play for children, utterly unacceptable, unsuitable accommodation for families with children.
Are they at the table when people are deciding where money is spent? And the answer to that question is no.
All we are asking is to be treated with respect and dignity, to be involved in decisions affecting our lives and to have our human rights respected.
The Participation and Practice of Rights project works with communities in North Belfast and North Dublin. The project supports groups in using a human rights-based approach to tackle deprivation and inequality. The PPR project has been working with residents of the Seven Towers since the summer of 2006.
It is good to know that there are so many people interested in our stories, and hopefully you will be able to help us on this journey.
Goodness gracious, it sounds absolutely appalling. And you know, I don't want to put people off their tea, but there's no guarantee that it's even your own affluent that's coming up through the...
Well, exactly.
The Seven Towers are the biggest development of its kind on the island of Ireland. Having been constructed in the 1960s, the towers are in a serious state of disrepair, with maintenance, sewage, damp and other problems. Responsibility for maintenance and for allocating flats in the Seven Towers lies with the Northern Ireland Housing Executive, who are in charge of social housing in Northern Ireland.
The housing conditions are appalling, and very little has changed in the 40 years since the towers were built.
I mean, the conditions are terrible, they're not acceptable at all.
When the group first came together, they identified a large number of housing issues they faced as residents in the towers. Following the human rights section of the programme, they were able to select the particular issues they wanted to tackle using the human rights-based approach. The issues they wanted to address were pigeon waste. This included the build-up of pigeon droppings, dust, carcasses of dead pigeons, nests, feathers and infestations of mites caused by the waste which piled up behind the ventilation partitions on the landings. Maintenance problems and upkeep. This included both the actual problems and the housing executive's response when problems were reported. Rehousing families out of the towers. This simply means that the Seven Towers are not an acceptable form of accommodation for families with small children, and they should be rehoused. During the action research phase of the programme, the group designed and carried out a survey to gather evidence on the extent of these problems and how they were affecting other residents of the towers. In this way, they were able to produce a baseline picture of what things are like now. The right to participate in decisions which affect their lives and the right to hold those in power to account are also central to the human rights-based approach. The survey found that people living in the Seven Towers were excluded from decisions made about their housing and had no effective means to hold the housing executive to account. The next step the group had to take was to decide how their right to housing could be made better over time and how this could be monitored to see whether the right was being fulfilled.
Conditions in the tower are not good. So there needs to be, at first, an acknowledgement that there's a problem. When there's an acknowledgement that there's a problem, then you can move to the next step of, well, how do we actually deal with that problem?
Human rights indicators and benchmarks, which measure whether or not governments are meeting their obligations and targets, are usually set by governments themselves.
They're very good at gathering the data. They're not very good at then redirecting the resources.
In order to ensure real participation, i.e. that the group as residents were deciding how their rights could be made real, they chose the human rights issues they wanted to see improvement on.
Of course, the entitlements and duties imposed by the right to adequate housing must be effectively implemented by states. This is one of the obligations. The states are the duty bearers.
The Northern Ireland Executive has pledged to pump money into a rundown residential area in North Belfast. The appalling housing conditions in the Seven Towers high-rise flats were highlighted last month when residents presented evidence to a panel of human rights experts. The Social Development Minister has promised to take action, but residents say they are not going to let the issue be swept under the carpet.
Well, over the next 12 months we're going to be monitoring by doing surveys, etc., to make sure that they are meeting our rights as far as rehousing families out of the flats and dealing with the damp and moldness. And at the end of the 12 months we will be reporting back to the panel of human rights.